Hello once again. In part 1, we have seen how to install database activities package, and also we have seen how to connect SQL Server. Along with that, we have seen different activities such as connect, disconnect, execute non-query, and execute query. Now, in part 2, we'll see the other database activities which we have not covered as part of part 1. They are insert activity, another one start transaction activity. As the first activity, we will learn about insert activity. So I can say this is bulk insert activity because of in our previous session, that is part 1, we have seen how to insert the data into the database by using execute non-query. But in the same way, if I want to insert bulk records, let's assume if I'm having 100 records, 200 records, so that I can't go ahead and I can insert all the name one by one, right? That is the kind of data entry kind of thing. But there is one more activity that we have in the UiPath to insert all the data at a time. That is by using insert activity. What insert activity does? Insert a compatible data variable in an existing data table. Nothing but if you're having any bulk data, first of all, we'll store in the data table. From there, I'm going to insert the data by using insert activity into the existing database table. Okay. So what it will do, it will return as how many rows has been affected once you have inserted as a bulk data. I will show you how it is. So if there is any issues in the data table, like if you are sending any some kind of wrong data, if you are sending in the data table, then what will happen? The save will be failed and it will returns back. Let me switch to UiPath Studio. First of all, what I'm going to do, I'm going to add a new sequence by clicking on add sequence. I'm going to give the name as insert activity. That is, I will say bulk. So because of we are going to be insert the data in the bulk. Okay. Now let me click on create. Now let me go to activities, and where we'll find this insert activity. We'll find under app integration. Under database, you will find insert. First of all, let me drag and drop this activity onto the panel. And then we'll see the properties. First of all, the important thing is the properties. Over here, you can see the connection configuration over here. The connection string, which connection string that you are going to connect to the database. If you already exist the connection string, then you are going to use this existing connection. And the provider name, that what are the based on the connectivity that you are going to give the provider name. And you can see that they are the two important properties that we have. One is data table, another one is the table name. This data table is nothing but whenever you are going to insert the data, you have to send in the data table format. Okay, and this is the table name, already existing table name that I'm going to give over here. And once you have been inserted the data, the number of rows has been affected over here that you can see in the affected rows. Now I will go to the database first, and there is already I have created a table with the employee details, right? In the previous session also we have seen. Now what I have done, I have dropped and recreated this employee details table, so that what will happen, you don't find any data as of now when you are going to execute select star from employees. Let me go ahead, let me execute it. You can see I'm having ID, employee name, location, date of joining, and the salary. These are all the things that what you have is blank, and you don't have any records. You have 0 records right now. Now I want to insert all the thing at a time. Like assume I want to insert the hundreds of records at a time. How can I go ahead and do that? By using UiPath Studio. Now by using insert activity, we can go ahead and we can do that. Now let me go to configure connection. Now in previous sessions, we have seen existing database connection. Right now what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a new database connection by clicking on connection wizard. I'm going to select the data source as a SQL Server, and the data provider is .NET Framework data provider for SQL client. I'm going to select this, and then I'm going to click on OK. Now it is asking for the server name. I will give it as nothing but localhost SQL 2012 is my server name. I have shown you already where we can find this name, right? Over here you can see the server name, or here also you can see the server name. Okay, now I'm going to use Windows authentication because of I'm not using SQL Server authentication. Now, what is the database name? That I'm having company as my database name. Now, I'm going to test the connection by clicking on Test Connect. The connection is succeeded. Now, we'll click on OK. And you can see over here, connection string is so-and-so thing, and the provider is system.data.sql client. This is the same thing. And you can see over here, the namespace is we are going to select as SQL client. Now, the major properties is the data table. How can we get the data table? Okay. Before going to start that, I will tell you this table. Which table we have to give it over here. This is the same table which we are having as part of database. I'm going to give that table. This data table has to exist in the database. Okay. And after that, I will show you how many affected records also. Now we will talk about the data table. How we can get the data table first. Okay. Let me go to my project. Over here, you can find employee details. Let me open that. Now you can see I'm having a lot of employee details. Almost all we are having bulk details over here. Now I'm going to use the same Excel to insert the data. All right. So how can I get this data employee details.excel into my data table? We're going to use Excel application scope to read that data. Okay. Now I'm going to type Excel application scope. Let me drag and drop Excel application scope on my panel. Now I'm going to select the path of the Excel by clicking on Browse File. I'm going to select Employee Details. Now, how can I read the data in the particular sheet? By using Read Range Activity. Read Range Activity. Let me drag and drop this activity onto the Do panel. And you can see over here, the sheet one is the sheet one which I am going to read it, and the entire data I'm going to read it. That's the reason I'm going to give double quotes. And you can see the properties of the read range. I'm going to use add headers as an option. That is nothing but I'm having headers in my data table. And I'm going to store this data in the data table by clicking on Control K. That I'm going to set the data variable. I'm going to say read employee details. I will say read employee details. Let me click on enter. Now this data table which I got it from the Excel application scope by using read range activity is the input for the insert activity. Now let me go to variables, and you can see the variable has been created, but the scope is do. Now what I have to do this scope, I'm going to use for the entire sequence because of the same variable I have to use it in the insert activity, right? Now let me go ahead. I'm going to select insert activity, and there I'm going to give read employee details. What will happen if you don't give? You don't find this data table over here. Now, as an inputs, I have given data table and the table name, that is database table name, as employee details. And I want to know how many record has been affected. How can I get it and know it? I'm going to set a variable over here. I will say affect rows. Okay, affect records. I will give it as FFREC, and then I'm going to click on enter. And you can see over here, a new variable has been created with the variable type int32. Now to know this one, what I'm going to do, I'm going to use a message box over here. Let me drag and drop this message box after insert. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to give the message box as inserted rows. I'm just going to give message as inserted rows. So how many rows has been inserted? Concatenating with affected records dot to string, because our message box only accept string only. All right. Now let me save the bot. And now our bot is ready for the insert activity. Now let me go ahead. Let me run the bot. Bot execution has been started. This Excel also read the data, and you can see number of inserted rows is 10. So that we got the message box successfully. Now let me click on OK. Now let me go to the database, and then I'm going to execute the same query by clicking on execute or F5. You can see all the data. So what are the bulk data that we have got it in the Excel, all the data has been inserted successfully over here. Now, I will tell you one more thing over here. Let's assume in the read data, if you have any kind of wrong data, if you are having, let's assume in the salary place that you are having some characters over there. In that case, it will fail and it won't insert the data into the database. Okay, this is also what we have to keep in our mind while we are going to work with insert activity as part of database activities. Now, we'll talk about the start transaction activity. So what it will do, the start transaction activity connects to a database which can perform multiple transactions with the database. I will let you know about this point. What is multiple transactions? It's nothing but if you're going to do inserting into the one table, table one, and also you're going to insert into the another table, table two at the same time. They are called multiple transactions. At that time, if you're going to use transaction property set is as true, what will happen at the end of the bot, it will be execute all at a time and then it will be committing as a single transaction. Okay, I will show you with example. If you're going to make it as false, then what will happen, it will be committed individually, and once the transaction has been completed, it will be the connection between the UiPath and the database will be closed automatically. Now, let me show you with the use case. Now, I will show you two kind of scenarios over here. One is positive scenario, another one is a negative scenario. If you see over here, in the positive scenario, I'm having two transactions. One transaction is that in the employee detail table, I'm going to insert the data in such a way. I'm the fan of Rajnikant, so that I'm going to use his name. Please don't mind. And I'm going to give Chennai details, and after that, his date of joining and his salary. I'm going to insert these details into the employee details table by using the first transaction. In the same way, I have created one more table with the name of personal information, where I'm going to store his personal information such as name, age, gender, and date of birth. These are all the details which I'm going to do as a multiple transaction. But this is my positive scenario because of, if you see over here, I'm going to insert the data in the positive way. You don't find any kind of errors over here. Let me go ahead, let me execute it. Now you can see number of rows has been affected, one row affected and one row affected in the two tables. Now how can I check it out? Let me click on select start from employee table as well as the personal information table. You can see over here the 11th row is Rajnikant and so on, right? And also in the another table we are having multiple data. I have inserted multiple times. Okay, that is the positive scenario. And now, if you see the negative scenario, I'm going to, in the personal information, I'm going to give it as a test on behalf of my age. I'm going to give it in integer format. I'm going to give it as string. In that case, what will happen? If you're going to set as begin transaction from the database side, so it won't insert the data until the both transaction has to complete it. Okay, that is the thing, one thing. And if you see right now what is happening when I'm going to execute, one row has been affected, another row is failed. That is, first transaction has been inserted successfully, another transaction has been failed out. Now, if you see again over here, okay, now you can find it out over here only two records, whereas in the first table you have inserted the data successfully. So in some of the cases, like if there is any dependency on the employee table as well as the personal information table, so if the record is failed in one of the table and you don't want to insert into the another table, in that case you are going to use start transaction. Okay, this is in short that I need to both the both the table has to insert or update based on the requirement. Then what I'm going to do, I'm going to set as true from the UiPath for the start transaction. Okay, now I will show you how to do that from the UiPath Studio. I'm going to create a new sequence by clicking on add sequence. I'm going to give it a name as start transaction activity, and then I'm going to click on create. Now let me go to activities. I'm going to use start transaction activity. Let me drag and drop onto the panel. First of all, we'll see the properties. As we know that the common properties and the connection configuration we're having, connection string, that is which we are going to give in the string format. Another one, existing connection. If you are already using any existing connection, then you are going to use this existing connection. And the provider name, which provider that we are having, that is SQL.Data.SQL client is the provider. Okay, and you can see apart from that you don't have anything, because of whatever you're going to do activities, you are going to do that activities in this do activity over here with the starting of the transaction, start transaction activity. And you can see the output. Whatever the database connection you want to close it, you can close it by using this database connection. By default, the start transaction will itself it will close once all the activities has been completed. Okay, don't worry about that. Now let me go ahead, let me configure it first. Now I don't have any existing connection, so that I'm going to use connection string, and then I'm going to use SQL server, and the provider is SQL provider, that is .NET Framework data provider for SQL client. Let me click on OK, and I'm going to use the same server name SQL 2012, and then I'm going to use Windows authentication, and you can see the database. I'm going to use the company. Okay, now click on OK, and I'm going to use the provider over here, system.data.SQL client. Let me click on OK. Now I have just started the transaction, but what about the queries that I have to execute? Now if you see in my database, I'm going to use the part 2 scenario to insert the data, DML operations. All these DML operations, I can use it by using execute non-query. Let me go ahead, let me drag and drop this one. And then for this edit query, I'm going to use the first query over here. This is the one which I'm going to use it. In double quotes, I'm going to give it. Okay, this is for one transaction. Another one, you can see the DB connection, it is must and should. So I will give it over here. You can see for the start transaction, I'm going to give the database connection over here by clicking on Control K, DB con. Okay, this is the DB connection as an output. And you can see the use transaction. This will the main property that what we have. I will let you know that. Now I'm going to execute non-query. I'm going to use the configuration over here, and I'm going to use existing one, that is DB connection. Let me click on OK. Now for the first transaction, I have used this one, and the second transaction also I'm going to use another query, another execute non-query. Now for the second transaction, this is insert into the personal information. This is, I'm just going to hard code directly. Okay, now I'm going to delete the entire thing. Now let me click on OK. Now I'm going to use for this one also, I'm going to use the DB connection as dbcon, which is existing connection. Okay, now let me save the bot. Now let me explain you about the main property, that is use transaction. If you see over here, when you are making it as true, these two transactions will be inserted at a time. If anyone is fails, it won't insert the data. Now let me show you the part 2 scenario. Let me execute the bot. To make you understand what I'm going to do, I'm going to truncate these two tables data. Okay, now if you see, I don't have any data in these two tables. All right, now by using our UiPath Studio, I'm going to give the transaction use transaction, so that if I'm going to insert the data, it has to insert in the both the tables, or else if anything is failed, it don't want to insert in the both the tables. Now I will show you by setting the property set as true, that if there is no errors, then it will be save the data in the two tables. If it is false, it will be individual. Let me go ahead, let me run the bot first to make you understand. Now you can see bot execution started, and it has been successfully completed the bot. Now let me go to SQL Server. Now let me see the data over here. You can see in the both the tables, that is one is employee details as well as the personal information, that data has been inserted successfully. So how it is going to do? It is going to take it as a single transaction over here, so that in the past 2 scenario, it has been inserted the data in the both the tables. Now what I'm going to do, I have given the option over here as use transaction as selected. That is nothing but true. Now let me give some error over here in the second query. Let me click on edit query. What I'm going to do, I'm going to make the age over here as test. I'm just giving an error over here to make you understand how it is working. Okay. Now, if you see, this is an error. Let me click on OK. Now, let me run the bot once again. Now, bot execution has been started. And you can see we got an error at the second transaction. First transaction has been completed, but the second transaction has been thrown an error because of we know the test is string data type. That's the reason it is going to throwing an error. But what will happen at the database side? Both the transactions will not insert because of we have given use transaction as true. Now let me go ahead. Let me check the data tables over here. You can see in the first table also the data is not inserted. So both the transactions are dependent on each other by using use transaction when you are making it as true. Now let's assume I don't want to depend on each other. In our real-time scenarios, what will happen on one table? I don't want to depend on that. In that case, I'm not going to use this use transaction. Now let me go ahead. Let me make it as false by unchecking this one. Now let me save the bot. Now let me run the bot. Even I'm going to run the bot with errors. Okay, I have not changed any query over here. Now I have made only one property as false, that is use transaction. Now if you see, the first query has been executed and the second query has been giving an error. But at the database side, if you execute that, you can see the row number 3 has been executed, that is with the ID 3, and the second table you don't find the data because of it has been individually committed the data. Whenever you use transaction as false, every transaction will be work it as a individual and then it will commit the data for each and every individual query. But whenever you have use transaction as true, inside the do activity, all the transactions will be set as single transaction, and one of the thing has been failed, entire data will be rolled back. This is how we are going to use start transaction. I hope you understand how to use insert activity, and also we learn how to work with start transaction activity as part of the DB activities. Thank you for watching UiPath tutorials. If you have any queries related to this concept, please post them in the comment section. I will see you in the next session. Till then, bye bye. Have a nice day.